My name is Tom Howard. We're going to talk about what your cannabis company needs to do in its first 90 days. We're going to be spending about an hour together. We're going to go over an 11-page document. We're not going to get too drilled into it, but we are going to go with the real broad strokes. The goal for today is for any cannabis startup company to get some feet under it and to see where they should be going over their first 3 months and then what they can do next. If you want to get in touch with us, you can go over to my law blog, cannabisindustrylawyer.com, or you could find us on our podcast, Cannabis Legalization News, on any podcast provider, and of course on YouTube, where we do have about 25,000 subscribers there. If you're one of them, you are awesome. And if you're not, don't forget to go over to YouTube and subscribe. This will be for members only, this type of content here. And now we can get into what it is. And so I'm going to be going over a document with you that's fairly lengthy. I might also grind up some marijuana while I do it. Now, I know some people like to call that cannabis, and I'm one of them. Lauren, are you able to share your screen again? Isn't that awesome? This is what the state of Illinois provided for would-be dispensary applicants, a concept of a simple dispensary ownership. So if you thought that this was a mom and pop type of shop, the highly regulated cannabis industry, which if you're joining us from New York, New Jersey, maybe even Arizona still has regulation, even though it's more easy to apply. What about Ohio? Anybody from Ohio in the house? And then from Illinois, there are and Virginia, there's a lot of states that's going to see a lot of cannabis dispensaries. I'm not sure if all of them will resemble this type of corporate structure. So let's go to the main document now, Lauren, if we can. Let's go over to the form grower initial strategy. And so if you go to our website, Cannabis Industry Lawyer, and fill out the Get Started page, I'll zoom in a little bit. That's pretty good. So the first point we're going to really be discussing is the formation guidance. A lot of people say, well, what business organization should I be? Should I be a sole proprietor and just apply by myself? Should I be a pass-through disregarded entity like an S Corp or an LLC? Well, let's talk about what the IRS likes to do. Audit people, and you're going to be one of those people. Why? Because at the core, what you are after is a license to engage in the cannabis business. As such, you are, or somebody around you, will be trafficking in a Schedule I substance defined under federal law because Congress is completely inept to do anything until there's a travesty or some type of tragedy that befalls people. And for very, very long, it's just been easier to arrest and incarcerate people for no real good reason when it comes to the cannabis plant. And there it remains, right alongside heroin, for no good reason at all, except for congressional ineptitude and courts believing that this is a political issue. If it's such a political issue, how come, like in South Dakota or even Mississippi, if you're joining us from those two jurisdictions where you, in theory, should be looking forward to a cannabis license application window, are getting fought by your own states to overturn the will of the people and to recriminalize cannabis, or as they call it, maybe marijuana in your state. So why are we recommending a C Corp status? And does that mean that you have to file as a corp in Delaware? No. You can file as a corp in your own state. You can file as a corp in Delaware, or you don't even have to file as a corp. You can be an LLC. An LLC is allowed to make a tax election so that it can be taxed like a C Corp. Now, you might not understand how C Corps are taxed. Maybe you're a business owner. If so, you've come to the right place, because the business that you seek to own now should not be your first one. One of the reasons why the business should not be your first one is because it's a freaking highly regulated business. It's like saying that you want to own a bank, or that you want to own a hospital, or that you want to own a casino. It's a very regulated business in your jurisdiction, unless you're joining us from Oklahoma. Regulations will be coming there. That's one of the problems with the freewheeling aspects of their laws. They tend to attract regulations thereafter. So now, why are you going to want to be a C Corp, or at least elected to be taxed as a C Corp if you're an LLC? Because of your likelihood of audit by the IRS. You are substantially more likely to be audited by the IRS if you are a cannabis company. And what do I mean by substantially? A 20x return. Okay. Your average company, like my law firm and my law and consulting firm, Collateral Base, where if you want any help from us, you can email me at tom@collateralbase.com or Google Collateral Base and go to my website, collateralbase.com. Or, kind of lost my train of thought there. I was in advertisement mode. Haven't even sparked the joint yet. But anyway, it probably had to do with corporations and audit risk. If you're just like a corporation, for example, my law firm is an S Corp. One class of shareholder pass through, and that's fine because I don't have any cannabis license ownership. I am not a tier 1 marijuana related business under federal law and banking policy and regulations, also known as an MRB, marijuana related business. And as a result of that, my audit risk is only about 1%. But if I'm holding a cannabis license, my audit risk is 20%. 1 in 5. Why is it 1 in 5? Because of right there. If they're going to try to audit my law firm, it's worth $493 an hour for them. But if they're going to try to audit your cannabis company, it's going to be about $1,400 an hour return. And so the allocation and the resources for the IRS agents only go so far. And if they're trying to justify and get as much return for their time spent auditing you, that's why you're seeing a lot of audits, and then you see it through IRC 280E. So they go through your records and they try to pick up all the disallowed deductions that you want to take as a business owner. All those deductions that you can't get for carrying on business because it's a Schedule 1 or Schedule 2 substance. If you do not understand IRC 280E, it effectively means that you're going to be double taxed. And one of the links in this, and Lauren, you can keep scrolling down this. And so we're going to start talking about preferred interest and those types of shared. You can stop just a little bit too far. We didn't, yeah. And so like that's on the screen. You can kind of read it and start with that paragraph, please. No, the next. Maybe sometimes it is just, we're trying to streamline things over here and figure out what has the best method of doing a webinar. And so far I have been just for $550. Okay, fine, Zoom, but it is clunky as F. Anyway, what isn't clunky as F is how you can organize your business. Why is it a C Corp and not a regular LLC or a pass-through entity like an S Corp, one class of shares? That's why with a C Corp or an LLC, you have the ability to create different types of classes of share ownership. So with one company, you could have a company that has 3 different classes of shares. One of those classes of shares could be offered only to a certain type of investor. That type of investor is somebody who's called a qualified investor. And I want you to know that's not a term of art. The 2 terms of art are qualified purchaser and qualified client under some very old federal laws from the 1940s regarding investments. And there's a type of person that is a qualified client or a qualified purchaser. And it depends on how much money that person or entity has. You are going to need one on your team. And so you want to attract them by offering them preferred shares. One of the methods of avoiding taxes, and again, that's one of the reasons why we set you up as a multi-tiered C Corp, for tax purposes at least. For flexibility purposes, you might want to be an LLC. But for tax purposes, you're going to want to be taxed as a C Corp. And so you're going to have different classes of shares and ownership. This is essentially a hedge fund meets Google. And so you want to have these different types of shares so that you can offer a different deal to your real money guy, your real money backer, your qualified member of your team. You're going to want to offer them preferred interest. Very often, these are your limited partners in the sense that they have a lot of money and maybe they want some exposure to the cannabis game. And by a lot of money, like I said, more than $2 million. And then you would give them carried interest and you would try to get them a 20% IRR. That's an internal rate of return. So the goal is to find somebody who wants to get the preferred shares and make 20% return every year on their money that is collateralized by your company's real estate. Now, if you're going to buy your real estate or if you're going to lease your real estate is a very big difference. And so you may have seen a lot of webinars in the industry or news in the industry about what they call M&A, sale and leasebacks. So that is one aspect of how you can use money and move it around between your LLCs or your related entities to avoid IRC 280E to the best of your ability. It happens a lot and it gets quite complex. Remember that simple chart that Illinois provided for a dispensary? That's one of the reasons why. And so now that you know that you're going to have a qualified investor and then you're going to try to offer them preferred shares, here's how the preferred shares kind of work, you know, if you're a hedge fund. So you would have your preferred, like 8%, let's say. The first 8% of profit go to those guys. All right. And then you have a 3 or a 4% catch up. So then 3 or 4% to the general partners, to the owner operators of the cannabis company. And then after that, you usually have a split. And so that's your carried interest up to a threshold of approximately 20%, whatever deal you want to work with your preferred, note holders is your own deal. It's lots of negotiations that can go on in the business. And then you have that class of shares secured or securitized by collateral base that would have the real estate in it. And so those classes of shares are to a certain extent secured. And then the real estate isn't owned by the company. The real estate's owned by a different company. And the manager of that company is that company, is the cannabis. The cannabis conglomerate, that's the thing we might want to now start getting into as we have been discussing the formation issues. And then this is only page 1, guys, and I'm only going to be doing this for an hour. So that's one of the things, you get a lot more if you actually buy the stuff, but we will be talking very, very generally about these types of things. So let's explain a little bit. And Lauren, if you would be so kind as to go to the picture that the state of Illinois provided with the dispensaries, that chart that we were looking at earlier. There we are. And yes, hit the full screen. Cool. All right. This is what a simple dispensary is supposed to be if you are a publicly traded cannabis conglomerate. And of course, that's why everybody's here, so they can make all that money, go public, and then spend the rest of their lives in utter bliss. So you have a publicly traded cannabis conglomerate up at the top there. Let's call them Cresco or Curaleaf. Curaleaf's kind of popular out east. Maybe that's what it is. And then you have what they call a pass-through LLC. And I don't really like how all the arrows are pointing toward the licensee. I think that doesn't necessarily represent cash as much as management of the LLC, because Illinois did something that maybe your state's going to do, requiring ownership percentages to be for either social equity or some other certified purpose or residency requirements. And that's one of the reasons why these types of structures exist. Another one of the reasons is that the license process in and of itself. All right, so that licensee LLC at the very bottom, that is the only tier 1 MRB right there. They are the ones trafficking in the cannabis that's going to be hit by the IRC 280E. To the left and right, you have the holding and management LLCs. What are you holding? Real estate. What are you managing? The operations. And so the operations could be cultivation. They could be processing. They could be retail. All right. And then what do you have there at the top? You have the pass-through LLC. All the funny monies that are done after you pay the holding LLC and the management LLC go through up to the pass-through LLC. And that's where you hit your carried interest. And then it all goes back up to the publicly traded cannabis conglomerate, and they declare a loss like they always do, except for Trulieve, which is the only cannabis company that I'm aware of that is actually making a profit and also listed on the stock exchanges. I could be wrong on that, but the reason why they are able to make a profit is because they have a monopoly in Florida. One of the reasons the other cannabis companies can't make a profit is IRC 280E. So it creates all this compliance and avoidance planning. So your sophisticated lawyers and your sophisticated accountants are quite actively involved in this industry. And so that gets back to some people that are on your team. Let's go back to the main document and start talking about non-corporate organizational thingamajigs. Let's go down to the second bullet point. I think we spent way too long on that first one. We're just giving them all sorts of goodness. So go down to the second bullet point, please. We haven't gotten to that. The business model. Okay, here's a business model. And so we're going to be talking in theory about micro growers. And so this one's for the growers in the house. Now, your business model is either going to be grow, retail, or distribution of some type. All right. And that distribution is going to be an interesting type of business model. And a lot of these things are modeled over the 3-tier alcohol rubric that we got about 90 years ago when Prohibition, the first, was getting over, and Prohibition, the cannabis, was just starting. They separated Budweiser from the bars. All right. You can buy Budweiser at any bar, but you can't go to a Budweiser bar to buy Budweiser. This cannot be said for cookies, for example. Cookies is an exceedingly famous brand that is from Berner and California. The Jungle Boys were associated with cookies for some of the cultivation earlier on, and they have a partnership, but the Jungle Boys have their own thing going on, their own licenses. These are some of the nice things about those micro grower licenses, is the high concentration and focus and commitment to quality. Now, mixed use light versus premium indoor flowering. That is something. Let's go to the next page there, Lauren. All right. Yeah, there we go. So we could stop really talking about growing, because like that's really germane to the growers, but then all the transporters and the retailers are going to get kind of bored by that. So we can now get to stuff that is universal. We can talk about real estate, and we can also talk about the company's IP. Cookies kind of has a lot to do on this, in the sense that Cookies has a lot of that IP. When a new Cookies retail location opens, maybe in your state, there are going to be numerous company IP contracts that are allowing that blue branded, I'm sure they've sunk millions into their branding, structure, that an experience that is their retail will come alive. And you see how retail in that respect can be very effing expensive because of the real estate. Because real estate in retail can make a night and day difference, just like the cultivation conditions in cultivation can make not necessarily a night and day difference, but then there is a very active debate regarding what creates the best, quote unquote, best cannabis. And I'd say, you know, depending on where the stuff was grown, mixed light, which would be like a light depth greenhouse, depending on where it's grown, is an option. But if you're just trying to grow wherever, premium indoor. And so that's what the Jungle Boys do. What are they building in Florida as they prepare for their expansion there? Premium indoor. There's another great provider out in Arizona. I can't remember their name right now. I do mention them in here somewhere. Premium indoor. But then the Cannabis Cup, now which one? The Emerald Cup, the one that's in Humboldt and all that. Who won best flower? Mixed juice light. And probably like an organic grown mixed juice light. I'm sure it's probably like, it's not just how it's grown, it's also how it's handled after it's grown, how it's cured, how it's dried. All of that, very important, especially because of the monoterpenes. And then if you're a transporter, those monoterpenes need to stay. If you're a retailer, those monoterpenes need to stay. So if throughout your entire logistics line, throughout your entire supply chain, don't forget to, don't let the product get too hot. Those monoterpenes really like to be kept under 70, top 75 degrees. But anyway, the real estate, which can be even expensive. Like some people try to discount how, I mean, like you can put a cannabis retailer in a strip mall. You can, and I'm sure it'll do all right, and it'll be cheaper to build. But there's a reason why Cookies does how Cookies does it. You know, it's that experience. They're trying to defend that. So you can spend millions on real estate for your cannabis dispensary. Now that real estate asset provides you an ability to create stuff on your balance sheet and build credit and capital, and then also attract those preferred shareholders and give them a security, being that real estate, and then also isolate that real estate into that. And I guess, hopefully you can remember what the chart looked like, that real estate LLC over there. And then what would be the manager of that real estate LLC? Maybe the cannabis conglomerate up at the top. That plus, all the management one might go back up to the, top company. And then the holding and the pass-through one, sure, you go ahead and have that pass through so that you can book that then as income. And then it's profits. So then you're trying to get that tax status by having your preferred interest and your carried interest. And so your tax guy is going to be integral in helping a company like mine put together this corporate structure and plan that collateralizes all the obligations that in theory could be in your cannabis company, and then breaks them all out for, here's these investors and what they get. But then what about the people that are going to be actually running the show? They'll get a different class of shares. So let's go down to the strategy review. One key goal, and it says, so we have a strategy review that we're going to be providing. And so one of the things that you need to understand is going to be this zoning and this real estate aspect. And so in your first 90 days, the first week, you should find out where you want that dirt to be located. If it's cultivation, more rural, obviously. If it's retail, you want a lot of people there. And so if there's a lot of people there, the price is probably going to be hefty. And then not only that, the regulations are going to be thick. You're going to have a special use permit or something like that for it. The zoning will be an issue. Sometimes it's not. Why? Because they handled that issue. They got ahead of it. They know the guys. They've been local for years, all of that stuff, finding those relationships that the community is on board and wants to work with you is great, but be careful about that, because I've seen communities be receptive, and then once it's too late to move, the tables have turned and suddenly they want more taxes. So, it's one of those things. They want you until they got you, and then they want to have a little bit more of you. All right, go down to the next page. Let's see. That's another one that we want to discuss, is your initial finance and review. And so like your budgets, your plans, your milestones, your cash flow needs, all those types of things. When it comes to building cannabis real estate, it is the most expensive. And the reason why it's the most expensive is because you are going to put HVAC and security regulations on businesses like none other. Not only HVAC and security, environmental plans. Do you think that bar that opened down the street had to show the governing authorities its frickin' environmental plans? No, it didn't. It still had to probably have a hearing to be awarded a liquor license at a public hearing, and then there had to be a liquor license available for it, sure. But I'm pretty sure that as a part of that process, they didn't say, we want to see your environmental plans for this, or we would also like to see your employee and customer training and safety protocols plans. These will all have to be shown to those regulators in order for you to get the cannabis license. Your cannabis application is actually a condition of your license. Your cannabis application is like the operating manual, the owner's manual for the car that is your cannabis business. And because of that, it might be hundreds, if not thousands of pages long. And you're going to have to pay sophisticated consultants and attorneys like myself tens of thousands of dollars to do it for you, or have one of them on your team. Now, I said you needed a CFO, you needed a compliance officer as well. You have other people that you need on your team. But let's talk more about real estate before we start building out, in these financial reviews, what types of budgets you actually need, because real estate is going to be a large player of it. Your overhead then for cultivation is going to be different, obviously, than your overhead for retail, because you're going to have to provide for more months of cushion of payrolls and operations with money just going out, because you got to grow the weed, you got to cut the weed, you got to dry it, you got to cure it, trim it, package it, and label it appropriately according to your regulations, which, by the way, I'm sure there's going to be a packaging and labeling plan that you're going to have to do as part of your application to demonstrate compliance with every single rule. Hopefully your rules are being drafted right now and we see them this summer. Not sure if that'll happen if you're in, I don't know, Mississippi. But after you see the rules, after you see the statutes, then you can really understand what's probably going to be coming to the application. So you're still safe. You're safe to budget tens of thousands of dollars for your application. The guy who's going to charge you security plan is going to want 10 grand. The guy who's going to design your thing. And so like one of them's right there, hybrid tech, great. If you want to get a hybrid tech premium indoor farm, it's going to cost you, but boy, is it nice. And it might be like $600 a square foot installed. All right. And that gets real expensive real quick. And so those types of costs are going to be in the front end, and you're going to have to capitalize and collateralize them to the extent that you want, or you're going to say, I want to rent in the instance that you are a retailer. But, if you're going to be wholesaling or storing, I'm sure that you're going to need that real estate cost. And you're also going to need to figure into it, what is the storage requirements? Usually it's a DEA approved safe, and loading and unloading in completely enclosed locked spaces, or enclosed spaces, because sometimes they do have enclosed spaces out of the view of the public, because I have seen cannabis retail locations in strip malls, but then they would have the shipment out back where like the fences would be closed and you can't see through the fence and they're 9 feet high or whatever. All of that good stuff. So yeah, you're going to have to budget that in. Somebody's going to have to design those blueprints. Somebody's going to have to help you, unless you're a wizard and you already have licenses outside of Oklahoma, and you have SOPs for your cultivation, or you have SOPs for your retail, and that's usually your management LLC company. So who's going to be your manager and your operators and all these things? That's what I like to do when you're building out your founders shares, your B shares. These types of shares are going to be people in the community that have knowledge and experience and connections in the community. And that's why you're asking them to be on your board. Maybe somebody who owns a cannabis license and you want them on your board. That's how you stand out. I can make you the best application that satisfies every single element of compliance and demonstrates it to the effing letter. But that ain't going to matter if your New Jersey resident can't prove that New Jersey residentship, or if your team is just not that great, and that's one of the opportunities that you have with these B shares, to find people that you want on your team and fill the seats in your bus. And that's another thing that, you need to think about when you're putting your financials together. You should budget maybe $100,000 for your application if you're going to do it right. So it's going to be extremely high quality. Now, we don't know what those regulations are going to look like. Maybe you can get away with it for less, but in competitive states like New Jersey, you also may want to have budgeted $100,000 for when you sue. Where are the cannabis licenses in New Jersey from 2019? They're in court, along with the Illinois cannabis licenses from 2020. When you try to make these things too competitive and you don't do like what Arizona did, they just handed out licenses. That was, now if we're going to go over the finance and budget in Zona, it's going to be different. It's like, did you have the real estate for your grow? Did you have the real estate for your dispensary? Did you have the real estate for your processing? Did you have $500,000 in a bank account? Did you have the approval from the owner or landlord of all those pieces of real estate? You can apply. That'll be $25,000. The state of Arizona made millions by charging $25,000 to 360 teams for 13 licenses. But they've been awarded. That's one thing. Anyway, so your plans on your finance, that's something you absolutely want to spend months doing. You're going to want to recruit somebody who has budgeted and done pro formas and financial analysis in in the cannabis industry. Trying to find those guys, you can reach out to us. We can make some referrals to you, because the industry might not be in your state yet. And so it might be difficult to find good providers of the services for the compliance or the corporate legal services or the financial services or the security services or the cultivation services or the retail services or the extraction services, all that crap. It's going to be an exceedingly thin supply, high demand, and a lot of people are going to get flim-flammed. Sucks. Let's go to the next page. Next bullet point. Oh yeah, we already did some construction planning, but there's a few things we need to talk about on it. First, everybody thinks that they can just start growing muffins and that's going to be the cheapest, easiest thing to do. No, if you want to do foods, very often what you're trying to do is stay ahead of the FDA. And so you're going to need to have like good management or good manufacturing practices. CBD manufacturers spend fives of millions of dollars on their extraction labs. And you have to assume that there's a reason that they're doing that. And you may also have to do a lot of those. The THC industry actually has a lower barrier than the CBD industry that's trying to prepare for the FDA when it comes to the manufacturing and extraction types of laboratories. But they aren't inexpensive. And very often the state is going to give you X amount of time in which to be open. So while the extraction lab is quite a bit easier to build, the price of it may have surprised you. It'll be in the low millions. And then the price of the cultivation, that's where you see like little phases, modules, if you will, a phased or module phase where you're going to ramp up to whatever type of square footage the license allows. And then you may want to go further. Every single one of these licenses is going to be an annual thing. And you might have to pay the license fee every 2 years, but you have to apply for the license usually every year, renew the license that year. And when that renewal time comes up, if you're ready to build out more canopy space, you can work with your state to hopefully be given that award of additional canopy space, and then your business can grow. Ideally, your business can grow. You're still going to want to be in operation in 6 months. And so like Hybrid Tech actually has a little bubble. There was another guy's called, I think, Delta 9 that contacted me. It looked like they were building these things out of shipping crates, 190 square foot little container that you could do premium indoor flower in. So phase 1, buy a $70,000 bubble and say we're in production. Phase 2, build the actual structure. You're demonstrating compliance, right? How are you going to be in production in 6 months? Well, we have a quote that lasts until whenever you think the award of your license will be, and you can go from there. Okay, let's drop down more. The construction planning, like I said, 6 months is very important. You are going to want to screen the construction planners depending on what you're building. Simply because the HVAC, the electrical for the cultivation is the most important. That one is very inside baseball. And so that's one of the reasons why, we can give you guys some people to call. It may be more difficult to find the right person to help you build that in your state. All right, let's go to the next ones. Here we are, about 40 past the hour, getting to banking and finance. With the banking and finance aspect, people are going to want to know, when should we get a bank account? And you will want to know the deal way before you get a bank account. So like, when are you going to get your lawyers and stuff involved? I would get your lawyers and stuff involved after you understand the deal, after you know who's getting what and well, not necessarily all on your team. It depends on the lawyers, because like, sure, I'm a lawyer, but I'm not just I ain't no divorce attorney. I've never done criminal law, but I have represented a lot of banks. And so one of the reasons why banking is so hard, we've already talked about it, not just the IRC 280E, but it's the Schedule 1 schedule itself in the Controlled Substances Act that says marijuana is tantamount to heroin. And so a litany of federal crimes exist just by what the federal government is doing is essentially like the implicit authorization of financial crimes on one of the largest orders of magnitude, at least when it comes to dollars, that I think in the history of our company or our country. I cannot think of another instance where the federal government has provided literal guidance from the Department of Treasury. It's called the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network. It's a branch of the Department of Treasury that has to deal with something called suspicious activity reports, SARs, SARs. I think my bank just got one. Somebody else's bank just got one, because when we send out invoices, very often they're in excess of $10,000. And that is the most famous SAR that anybody knows, is a transaction for over $10,000, very often in cash, or any type of transaction may end up triggering a suspicious activity report. And then it'll just be like, I was paying a vendor for websites, or I was paying my attorney, or I was paying a law firm's retainer. But then, you know, in your state, you might have been a consulting firm, if it's New York, New Jersey. But somebody did contact me and who wants to work with us, and as their New York, New Jersey license. All right. So there are 3 marijuana SARs, and that's one of the reasons why getting your bank account is going to be fairly difficult. You're probably also going to need a bank consultant, or somebody will offer you the services of being a bank consultant. There's that. When do you need the bank? Like I said, after you need the deal. So first, get the deal done, figure out how the money's going to be flowing, and then what LLC is actually going to be the one that's violating these aspects and therefore will not be able to get the bank account very easily. Right. My company's called Brax, because that's what this is all about. You guys might not know that yet, but this is all about Brax, or the Bract. So if I just called it Bract or Brax Ag Management, and what do you do? We're in agricultural management and marketing. Now, I'm not sure if you know what an ag marketer is, but it's essentially like an options trader. Yeah, us corn boys that are in the flyover country, real boring and stupid. So anyway, there are 3 types of marijuana SARs that your company is going to have to deal with. And you only want the first one. It's the marijuana priority SAR. It just says that you're there. And then there's a second one that's called, you know, the marijuana extra red flags SAR. And then there's the marijuana termination SAR, where your bank has figured out that what you're doing is not in compliance with the state laws, and they kick you out. So that's another reason you have to be completely compliant with your state's laws and regulations. Failure to do so will get you ejected from your bank. And your bank is going to be trying to ensure that you are compliant, because this purported safe harbor for the massive crimes that this bank is complicitly and profitingly participating in. Like I said, I don't know of any other instance in our federal government's history where the federal government, for 3 terms now, because it came out in 2000, it came out under Obama, it was there under Trump, and it's now there under Biden. For 3 terms, they have assisted a completely illegal operation with operating and obtaining bank accounts because of this FinCEN guidance from 2014. It's tens of billions of dollars of government complicity in the illicit transactions of cannabis. And as far as the federal government cares, they don't. It's all IRC 280E. They're taking all of that money. The industry, like all cannabis stocks, would pop in that. Like a lot of those ones that are losing money may not be losing money if this tax was gone. Anyway, so that's what you need to know about banking and finance. There will probably be some NDAs involved. The bank will not want you really talking about it. And so I wouldn't, you're going to have to handle your banking situation with a high level of decorum and confidentiality for the time being, at least until it's out of Schedule 2. All right, let's go to the next point. Yeah, let's do, actually, I think you need to go up a little bit more because we skipped one, I thought. No, it's banking and finance. If you guys want to know more about Reg D and private placement memorandums, go get in touch with us over at Cannabis Industry Lawyer and fill out one of the Get Started forms. But partnership operations, this is a good thing that you should understand. As a locally licensed holder, you have keys that the larger MSOs want and do not have. You have access to new markets. Those markets very often are rigged, for whom you guys, the local people, very often the markets are just going to be only open for the local population. For example, New Jersey's micro license, it's only for New Jerseyans. Illinois' cannabis license is only for Illinoisians because of the way they structured it. In fact, it's only for social equity applicants who are also veterans because of the way they structured it, and that is causing a lot of litigation. And so there are a few operators that are out there, like Cookies, for example. They might not have a license in a new state, so they will try to get an IP agreement or a marketing agreement, some type of partnership agreement where their brands and their strains will be available at a different cultivator's shop or at a different retailer's shop. And, you know, maybe part of that retailer shop's aspect is and this, you know, we can go to the, hey, Lauren, would you put back up, and we're going to use Cookies as the MSO this time, put back up the chart from the state of Illinois regarding the dispensary. All right. And so if we're using Cookies, Cookies is going to be that management over there on the LLC, maybe also the holding real estate. They might also have a real estate play, or one of their investors does. Real estate is so big in this industry. I mean, so big for green zoning and so many other things. And so like a real estate asset management company in cannabis, you know, it's probably also one of the things that I set up in Brax, because that's what the asset committee or the management committee does. They try to find what real estate assets they should pursue because they will appreciate in value, and you would then be able to have tax advantaged, you know, depreciations on your taxes, and also write-offs for any mortgage interest or other stuff like that. All right, so if this was Cookies, Cookies would be maybe the real estate holding, not necessarily the licensee LLC. That would be like New Jersey license holder LLC or Illinois license holder LLC. That management LLC over there, we should probably have that be like management ampersand IP LLC, unless the pass-through entity, the pass-through LLC is the, maybe that pass-through LLC is the IP LLC, but perhaps not. That pass-through LLC could just be an affiliate. Like, so that pass-through LLC could be completely owned by Cookies, let's say. But then they might use a different name to hide whomever is the manager of that. So that cannabis conglomerate there that's going to be sucking some money through that pass-through LLC, very similar ownership. And so then Cookies would be that management LLC. And then also, besides the management, you'd probably have an intellectual property for like their brand, like what those C, that trademark C they have, that trademark blue and white, and that font I'm sure is trademarked, and just like its general look and all those other things. And so all of that is sucking profit out of the Cannabis License LLC. And they're avoiding IRC 280E because are they selling weed? No, they are not. They are getting a licensing fee for that Cookies brand. Or no, they are not. They are providing management services for the operations of the licensee, where they are providing, you know, real estate, you know, rent for that licensee. All right. So now you see how all this money is coming off the table from the sale of marijuana, and they're trying to disguise it not as the sale. And so a lot of the IRC 280E litigation goes with, well, what constitutes that management company? All right, Lauren, thanks for that. Let's go back to the document. I'm not sure what one we're on. We'll talk for about another 10 minutes, and then we're going to wrap up. And so like in 5 minutes, give me a heads up in 5 minutes. Let's just, let's see, where are we? Product guidance. Let's skip product guidance. Yeah. Well, you can go back up to product guidance for just a moment. We'll just talk about that down. Yeah, where it starts with high quality cannabis flower. Try to put that at the top right there. All right. So this has to do with what is the market composition, just so that you guys understand. Approximately 40 to 50% of the market is flower. That may or may not include pre-rolls, but pre-rolls are about 10 to 15% of the markets. beverages are probably the fastest growing edible component, but edibles are currently only about 12 to 15% of the market. Vapes make up the rest about that, with about 15 to 25%. I would also include in the vapes the concentrates, and concentrates in and of themselves, like dabs and whatever, that's not all that much of the actual dollars spent. The king is still the bud itself, and then everything else is quite popular. So that's something you have to really, really think about. With marketing and distribution, this is something that I want you guys to consider when it has to do with how you're building out your board, because there's a lot of license restrictions regarding vertical ownership. You are going to need to make friends with other licenses. So if you are a cultivator, you may want to have a chief retail manager on your board. And then the point of that person sitting on your board is to let you know what's going on in retail, because maybe they own some retail locations. And I'm not sure, I know there would be ownership restrictions, but I don't know if there's board membership restrictions, right? So you might not be able to give them shares, but you could say, but we want you to sign this independent board member agreement. And so you get them that way. And then you might want to budget for that in your pro formas. Same could be going with any adjacent vertical. So like if you're in distributing, you might be looking for cultivating and retail partners. If you're in retail, you'd be looking for distributing and cultivating partners. See what I'm saying? And then of course, processing also is sometimes broken off as well. So you have this cadre of people in the industry with knowledge that would be comprising aspects of your board. Don't forget to, pay some attention to that, because those types of marketing connections and relationships will help you. I mean, think about it. You're going to eventually have to have that shelf space, or you're eventually going to have that great brand that has high quality. And so how are you going to make sure that your customers are going to be aware of you? All right, man. We're about 10 to the hour. Let's go and do a little bit more, and then we're going to go over the slides regarding your first 90 days as a cannabis company. So just scroll down, Lauren. Let's see what's on page 9, project timeline. Yeah, we already talked about that one a little bit. Operational guidance. Let's see what we have there. Yeah, operational guidance in this industry is pretty interesting. One of the aspects of it is because it's so regulated, you're going to have a lot of plans that other companies, unless they're like, a nuclear power station or a hospital or like a bank, the level of compliance is just simply not there. As a result, you are going to have a lot of technology on your stack. And so you're going to be working with people that are putting together state-of-the-art facilities or state-of-the-art security systems or odor mitigation systems. It's a lot. And because of that, make sure that you have the right members on your team to demonstrate the compliance that you're going to need to have, not only from, being a good operator, but being a compliant operator. And so SOPs to, help reclaim the water and ensure that your cannabis cultivation is as green as possible. Those SOPs then need to be developed, refined, and then fit to the particular state that you're operating in, right? Oklahoma, you have the SOPs, great. You're probably ahead of the game. Oklahoma, you try to get your next shop, let's say in Illinois. All right, well, you still have those SOPs. Great, let's take them. Now let's look at all these regulations in Illinois and make sure that none of these SOPs breaks those regulations in Illinois. But also, let's also demonstrate to the state of Illinois how these SOPs comply with the regulations and the statute that is being awarded through this process. So really work with people that understand the industry, and then understand the industry and as it goes from state to state in competitive and highly regulated licensing structures. So just basically any state that's operating without Oklahoma is fairly highly regulated, unless they're operating in the legacy market. Very few regulations in the legacy market. Okay, so with operational guidance, I think maybe we should just go to the summary of your first 90 days as a cannabis company. That's the next because there's a couple more pages on that. But like I said, you're not going to get the whole thing. You're just going to get a little bit, just about an hour worth. You want the whole thing? We sell these, and you can get in touch with us over at Cannabis Industry Lawyer on that. But let's talk about your first 90 days. What state, what license, what people do you know that are on your team? And then we have to start talking again, find your qualified investors, find your accredited investors. Nobody else should really be involved unless you are that person and you just don't happen to be an accredited investor. Your accredited investors, they would be great members of your board, because usually you don't become an accredited investor unless your life is going okay. And if your life's going okay, you may have some power and authority and some connections. And therefore, you might want them on your board. Same with if you're a qualified investor, you might have that generational money, that generational wealth money. And so maybe they'd be interested in helping you get some of that generational wealth money by participating in some preferred interest that is a very exclusive and limited offering only for qualified investors. And this is the other thing I want you to understand. Do you have skin in the game? Do you? Like, how many of the people on your team, if you capital called them and said, guys, capital calling you, pass around the hat, everybody puts in $5,000. Here's the term sheet. This is what we're doing. How many of your team members would leave? Because if you're going to try to spend $100,000 on putting together a high quality application and hopefully have enough for like some retainer money, maybe your $100,000 gets you your whole application, everything put together, and like $75,000, that's what that cost. And you have $25,000 in retainer money in case you have to sue, because many things could happen after you submit the application. Many things. So it's important to have skin in the game. If you're just doing this on a whim, and the people that are with you are not really with you, they don't understand the deal. They don't understand their upside. They don't understand their role. They don't understand what value they're bringing to the table. You ain't got them. Those aren't the right people, so start defining those roles. Make sure that you have that skin in the game. Are you the expert? Are you the money raiser? Are you the administrator? What's your role? That's one of the reasons why people usually have general counsel. Companies will have general counsel or fund managers, attorneys that are good with the paperwork and making sure that everything's being administered great. And then you have your money guys, the people that have a lot of rich friends that know other rich people that might be a good pool of preferred shareholders, and then you have your experts. They grow great. They extract the best. They are scientists that or maybe they're really, really passionate and driven regarding customer service and retail and logistics. If you have that expertise, excellent. That's why you're on the team. So there, for your first week, really kind of think about those things. Like, who do you know? What skin in the game are they going to want? What state, what license, of course, all that. Let's go to the next slide and talk about their next couple of weeks. Awesome. All right. So days 8 to 21, you're going to try to then start narrowing down the real estate. If you're going to use that, like, what type of preferred shares are you going to be offering your investors to help you pay for that real estate, the downstroke, the down payment? You would use these qualified investors to capitalize your business to the extent that you believe that it'll need for you to be able to become profitable. Or for like the cultivators, you get the profit starting to come in from the sales of your wares. Or if you are the extractor, same thing. The extractors are going to be even a month behind the cultivators. And then the retailers, very often they're placed first, but what product are they going to be selling? So they need those cultivators out there, and then they need those extractors, and then they need those relationships with the retailers. Look at all those types of real estate options that you have there and start thinking up your budgets appropriately. Okay. Establish your capital structure in your first month. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you hire a lawyer. Because the lawyer is going to be like, well, we could set it up this way, or we could set it up that way. And if you have one hand, then you also have the other one. Well, what are your goals with this? And they also might not know anything about IRC 280E. They might not realize how crazy regulated this industry is, or even what the cash flow opportunity is for the cannabis industry. Most lawyers, they did not smoke weed and they don't smoke weed. All right. So in your first month, that's kind of what you're going to be doing. In your second month, revise those numbers and start sharing them with your team. Give people roles. Remember, no free riders. And I would recommend that you do capital call people, because that is like a loan to your company. How much are you willing to believe in your own company? What are they going to get for loaning you that money? And by you, I mean your cannabis company. So a lot of the ways that people finance these prior to getting the award of the license is through convertible promissory notes. So they have, they borrow a little money. And so on the balance sheet of the company, it would be like, well, we owe our shareholders that lent us money to get operating some convertible notes. And those notes in theory can convert, and they may convert. And some of the term sheets that I have even provide for option rights, so that, it's the lowest amount in, and then that lowest amount in can provide for the highest amount of return, so that their risk capital is the lowest. And that risk capital then really allows you to put together a team that's not too big, so that all the profits aren't going to just be eaten by IRC 280E and all these weird employees and stuff. And you can get your stuff together. And so that's what I mean by setting your capital accounts for the operation, and continue screening and qualifying your team. And then we already reviewed the Illinois dispensary chart. We don't have to do that again, but that's really important, is that you aren't just having anybody. Like, you're trying to find the best people for your team. That's really what you should be trying to do in month 2 is, all right, well, I wanted this. This is where I think it is. This is what license I think it is. This is a rough ballparks of how much money it's going to be. And this is rough ballparks of how much cash, real dollars I need down to be able to effectuate this plan, get that license, get open for business, and make that marijuana money, generational wealth. And so that's what should be keeping you occupied in month 2. Let's go to the last slide, and then we'll plug the website. All right, now that you're 2 months in, you may want to start hiring a lawyer, right? So hopefully you've identified real estate and you have ensured that it is zoned appropriately, so that is where your dirt's going to be. And then you understand what that price point is, because real estate very often is the largest unknown in putting together your pro formas and your sources and uses for financials. Okay. And once you have that, then it becomes easier to start building out your financial pro formas. And these promissory notes that you would be offering, you don't even need, do you need a lawyer yet? You're getting there, because you might have a term sheet that a lawyer helped you prepare. And so after you understand the terms and the capital structure of your company, long before you've raised the money, don't take the money and all that, because then you've technically violated, if you wait too long, what the lawyer is trying to shepherd you into, if you've picked the right one, or consultants, if you've picked the fly-by-night one. And, again, this is where we've reached the point of the webinar where it's like, this is not legal advice, but you need to follow the laws even with raising money. And this would be called a 506B Reg D raise. And so because of that, you're going to have to file that with the SEC after you've raised the money. So before you accept any payments on the check, be like, I got to talk to my lawyer. We need to have some contracts drawn up. And then that also might be where that promissory note ends up. That promissory note might end up at a lawyer's office going like, and okay, I'll set up this thing for you. That'll be $50,000. So, I mean, if you are trying to set up a 506D capital raise, they can be expensive. But if you are trying to get into the cannabis industry and you don't have $4 million, you probably should set up a 506D capital raise. And that's something that you can start doing in your cannabis company's first 90 days. If you have any questions on that, I want you to go over to cannabisindustrylawyer.com. Click on, don't forget to fill out our sign up for our newsletter. It might be how half of the people that are at this webinar right now got notice of it. And then you can also fill out that little form that's right there. Can we help? Fill out that little thing. It's just a few questions. The survey will take 5 minutes. And with that, I think we're going to wrap it up. I think we're going to be wrapping it up. I realized that we had it was the first time we ever had, over 100 signups. Not everybody met it, but then when this goes out, go over to cannabisindustrylawyer.com, sign up for a newsletter, go over to our YouTube channel, Cannabis Legalization News. This will be on for 1 day, and then it's only going to be available for our subscribers. So thank you so much for joining us. Hopefully you guys all had a good lunch if you're in the Central Time Zone. And if not, I will see you tomorrow, where we have a really good show lined up.